Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. We're continuing on with our Rate It or Hate It series, going through some of the units within the Necrons Codex, giving you my personal way of playing them, what detachment I would prefer to use them in, and then at the end of the video I decide whether I rate them or I simply hate them. There are no in-betweens here. I've got to select one of them and it is just my personal opinion at the end of the day. As you can probably tell from my voice, I'm a bit nasally. I'm ill yet again. It's almost every month now. I'm getting ill. Something's going on these days. But anyway, let's get into this. The Canoptek Reanimator is the discussion point today for this video. So let's get into the datasheet. So this datasheet, we've got a 75 point model. It's got 8 inches of movement, which is pretty good. It's going to keep up with the majority of the units that are within this codex. Toughness 6 is okay. It's okay. 3+ armor is okay. 6 wounds. Leadership 7 plus, and OC is 3. You can't expect too much more from that. Now it does have a 4+ feel no pain save, which I'm going to jump over to the abilities now, which does massively add to the resiliency of this model. When you've got toughness 6, it already means your standard bolt gun kind of weapons, your strength 4, even strength 5. They're wounded on 5s. And then all the smaller stuff from your gaunts perhaps, that are normally strength 3, they need 6s to wound. So having the extra toughness of toughness 6 is actually not bad, but when you finally get through all that, you then got the 3+ armor save, and then you literally just half all the damage taken because of the feel no pain save. On average, you're halving that for every single damage wound that goes through. So I like the fact that it's got a feel no pain save because it will get targeted if it's out in the open, but when you've got the feel no pain save, it kind of puts opponents off. They think, is it actually worth it? Is it doing enough from the Necrons player? And they tend to move elsewhere. Now, in the previous, well, not edition, in the previous index, if you like, before we had the codex, I think it was more of a target. It was more of a target because of the ability. The ability has been nerfed. We'll move on to the ability now. In fact, we may as well, as we've sort of got into that. The Nano Scarab Reanimation Beam Aura. So Necron units within 3 inches. It used to be 12, so it's now 3 inches. When you're doing your reanimation protocols roll, whatever phase that is in, normally it's the command phase, but there are other ways of getting it in different phases. When you're using reanimation protocols, you get an additional D3. So if you've got, I don't know, you're trying to reanimate a Catacomb Command Barge, which is actually the previous video we did. Let's say you're trying to reanimate that using reanimation protocols. Instead of doing 1 D3, you're doing 2 D3. So an average roll of a D3 is 2. And if you had that twice, that would be like having 4 wounds returned rather than 2. So on a vehicle like a command barge, that's going to be useful. It will get quite a lot of its wounds back. But also on a unit, it's going to do quite well as well. Necron Warriors, you bring 4 back. Maybe it's a Locust Heavy Destroyer, you bring a whole one of those back. It can help. The problem is, it's only 3 inches now. It used to be 12, which used to be pretty overpowered, to be honest with you. When you actually go back and think about what it had, a 12-inch range is huge. It literally covers almost your entire army. If you take a couple of these, that just covers everything. And yeah, that was nasty. I think what they should have done is they should have gone to 6 inches. I think 3 is too small. They're effectively just attaching it to a unit at that point when it's just 3. Yes, you can string a few units into that 3 inches, of course. 6 inches I think would have been a little bit more fairer. 12 was too much. 3 isn't enough. But that's what it's got now, and that's why the points is 75. Now, it does have range weapons, but they're not really worth going over, to be honest with you. It doesn't have much of a damage outlay at range or in melee, so I'm not going to bother going through it. It's not what it's about. If you're very lucky, you might chip off a wound on a single gaunt or something throughout the entire battle, if you even remember to actually use its range weapon. Now, it is a vehicle. It's got the walker keyword, so you can heroically intervene with it if you wanted to. Maybe it jumps you onto an objective perhaps, but there's probably better units that could be doing that kind of thing. You don't really want this thing in engagement range. It's not doing much. It might survive because of feel no pain save, but really you want it to be following other units around that it can follow around. So that is the data card, and yeah, let's move into my tactics of how I use the Canoptek Reanimator. So if I was to be selecting a detachment to put this in, a key detachment in my opinion would be the Hypercrypt Legion. I know it's got the Canoptek keyword, so you would instantly think the Canoptek Court, but the Canoptek Court, along with all the other 4 detachments, are more about damage outlay and damage output. The Annihilation Legion is all about damage, getting into an engagement range. The Abasis Phalanx is a +1 to the wound roll. The Awakened Dynasty +1 to the hit roll. The Canoptek Court is your reroll and your hit rolls with the Canoptek stuff. So it's all damage, damage, damage. Whereas the Hypercrypt Legion is more about flexibility, versatility, scoring your secondaries, getting into position, movement, basically. So that's why I would select this as a key detachment, but it will work in virtually any of the detachments, really. But today I'm going to talk about the Hypercrypt Legion. What you need to be doing is hyper-phasing them in with something that's valuable. It could be 20 Necron Warriors, it could be a Locust Heavy Destroyers, maybe it's the Silent King, maybe it's a Catan Shard. Something valuable because you're going to be adding that extra layer of defense when using reanimation protocols. Now, in fact, a Catan Shard would be really cool at this moment in time because they're all pretty cheap. I mean, the Nightbringer's 255 points, it's too cheap. I'm sure that's going to get changed. So bringing a Reanimator alongside him probably feels like it's kind of worth it, but you're still getting the extra D3 in terms of reanimation. So imagine it pops in with the Nightbringer from reserves, you're double healing in your command phase, toughness 11 on the Nightbringer, it's got a 4+ armor, 4+ invulnerable save, 12 wounds, halving damage, now has double reanimation in the command phase. A lot of armies can't deal with something like a Nightbringer anyway. Some armies that can, maybe they choose to chip away at him and do it in a couple of turns, maybe 3 turns, maybe get him down to 6 wounds, then maybe, he then reanimates back 2 more, then get him down to, 1 or 2 wounds, then he reanimates a bit more. But when you got a reanimator there, you're bringing back an average of 4 wounds back. Because reanimation is D3, average of 2, you do it again, that's an average of 4. So those armies that are trying to chip away at your Catan are now finding it even more difficult. So it's only really the armies that can kind of deal with it in one sort of phase, one sort of turn. Maybe it's a melee based faction, maybe it's Tau, they might just blast him off the battlefield. Who knows, there are lots of different factions that can deal with him, but it is very situational on how they deal with him, and even if they do deal with him, it means the rest of your army is actually untouched. But if they don't deal with him and the Reanimator's there, that's going to be an absolute kick in the teeth for your opponent because they've now put everything into it, and yeah, you're bringing back 4 wounds. But yeah, in general, I think, like I said, it does work in multiple different detachments. It could be, for example, the Annihilation Legion. You can go with some Scorpion Destroyers. Maybe that's something. You've got to consider the points, like if it's 75 points and you look at your Scorpion Destroyers, the Scorpion Destroyers are 100 points for 3, so you'll take 6, that's 200 points. 75 divided by 6, let's do that on my phone quickly. 75 divided by the 6 models, that's 12.5. So it's effectively like having 12.5 extra points per Scorpion Destroyer. And for what you're buying, you're getting the reanimation protocols roll, which I think in some situations does help. In fact, let me break it down in a more easier way. Let me try again. So let's say you've got 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers. Let's change the change the unit completely. 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers, that's 150 points. You add the Reanimator for 75 points, which makes the combination as a total 225 points. On average, if you are using the reanimation protocols in your command phase, you're getting 4 wounds back. Locust Heavy Destroyers are 4 wound models, so you could effectively bring an entire model back. You're pretty much guaranteed to be bringing a model at that point, because even if one's on 1 wound left, you'd be healing 3, 1 more comes back with 1 wound. If they're all on full wounds, you're bringing an entire model back, and it's got full health. It's got all 4 wounds back. If you don't have that reanimator there, maybe you're just going to be healing 1, and you don't actually bring 1 back. There's no sort of guarantee. I mean, there's no guarantees anyway. You might roll a 1 and then roll another 1, right? But your chances are pretty much doubled. So you kind of got to consider, is it worth the 75 points? Let's try a different unit. 20 Necron Warriors. 20 Necron Warriors, that's 200 points, right? Reanimator 75, so you're effectively paying like 3.75 points per warrior more if you're using that combination to allow for another D3 in your reanimation protocols roll. Yes, their numbers as Legion has massively been nerfed this codex, but you need to bear in mind that warriors used to be 240. They're now 200. So you've already saved 40 points with your warriors just there, which is actually more than half the cost of the Reanimator. So you're kind of getting their ability back in a way, ish, because they used to have D3 plus 3, didn't they? So it's in a way. They get to re-roll it at least, but then you've got to take into consideration the Reanimator isn't actually attached to the unit. It's got an aura. It's only a 3-inch aura, but you could have maybe 2 bricks of 20 Necron warriors, 2 units there. If you got 2 of them, first of all, that's you've saved 40 points per unit from the old points cost, so you've already covered the cost of the Reanimator if you were playing old points. Obviously, you're not playing old points, but do you know what I mean? Their ability has been nerfed, but their points has gone down, so it kind of balances out-ish. But a way to look at this is, if you've got 40 warriors combined, both units within 3 inches of the Reanimator, it's less than 2 points ahead to bring the Reanimator there, because the Reanimator is 75 points. If you've got 40 models there and they're all paying 2 points ahead, that's actually 80 points. So you've gained 5 more there, because the Reanimator is only 75. So I think in some situations the Reanimator does work. If you've got a lot of Necron warriors perhaps, and maybe you're using Illuminazares in the middle of it for the AP on top of that, I think it can work in those situations. It can also work in certain situations where you've got your Catan Shard going up against factions that just simply can't deal with him in one turn. Is it as good as it used to be? Hell no. Hell no. That 12-inch range it used to have was massive. But if I had to rate it or hate it, and I've got no in-betweens here, I've got to make a decision. I've got to go with hate it. I've got to, because the situations aren't there. I mean, Immortals at the moment they've surpassed Warriors in my opinion. They are much better. The Catan Shards at this moment are kind of okay on their own, and when they do get a points increase, which is likely going to happen, it might not, but it likely is going to happen, that's going to mean a 300 plus model and then the 75 point model on top of it. That gets really pricey at that point, so you then got to balance out and factor in if it's worth it or not. But yeah, if I've got to rate it or hate it, I'm just going to have to hate it at this point. That's all I can do. I can't say I'm using it in my list at the moment. I'm just rather take more models. 75 points. What are Immortals right now? Are they still 80? They're 70. So you could take 5 Necron Immortals. So you've already gained, like if they do get targeted, you've already kind of gained 5 models just by bringing them. But you've got to bear in mind that's 5 models that can actually fire out every round. That's an extra 10 OC that you've got from the start. Maybe they're a separate unit. Well, there will be a separate unit because you've got 10 already in another unit, so they can go and do their own thing. I'd just rather have the extra feet on the ground than having a Reanimator, I think, at this moment in time. If they do change that range to maybe 6 inches, I'd consider it, but at this moment 3 inches effectively just attaches him to a unit, and then you've got to string another one along. Going back to that example with the 2 warrior bricks, that's cool and everything, but do you really need 2 bricks of 20 warriors together on the battlefield for 400 points plus a 75 point Reanimator? You'd rather probably separate them out a bit and let them do their own thing in different parts of the battlefield. So tying them together, I think, unless you're playing a way to castle up, but I don't think that's the way to play when you've got secondary cards that are random. So guys, that is my opinion on the Reanimator. Let me know yours down in the comments below and what kind of detachment you would use. I think you would just use anything really. But yeah, let me know down below and whether you rate it or hate it.